Yes, well done.
Thank you very much, the chair, Professor Joseph, and my co-presenters and other participants at this conference. The title of my work is Using Computational Method to Explore Similarities in D.O Fagunwa's and Amos Tutuola's Literary Corpora. The unique thing about the choice of the text being used is that Fagunwa is known as the first African indigenous writer or African writer who wrote for the first time right in 1949 in Yoruba language in his novels, and is using this as an instantiation of African novels in African language. And these novels were written in Yoruba language. To develop the corpus from this text, I used two of his works, which is Igbo Olodumare and Irinkerindo, ninu Igbo Elegbeje. Igbo Olodumare means the forest of God, and the Irinkerindo, ninu Igbo Elegbeje is expedition to the Mount of Thought. And I try to juxtapose or to take it along with Amos Tutuola's work. Amos Tutuola did not write in indigenous language, but wrote in English language. And most of his novels were written in English language, but he's an African writer. And what I want to establish has to do with the problem generated by some scholars like Bernth Lindfors, who after reading the work of Elegbeje and after reading the work of Amos Tutuola and also the work of Faguwa, there were arguments that it's like the one who wrote after the other copied from so it's like Amos Tutuola was being said to have copied from Faguwa because of the striking similarities. And you know, Bernth Lindfors is one of the foremost scholars who made it known and wrote it that it was like he stole from most of the thing. And the argument I want to establish is, can we trace the link beyond just textual similarities and try to see, could there be some unconscious things that are in the mind of writers based on even when they are writing in English language, their indigenous ontology, concepts, and categories are still registered, and those categories can be better clarified by going back to the root, which is the indigenous, those who have written in those native language. And to achieve this, I use Voyant Tools and Python for this analysis. And the first thing I try to do is to search for the most frequent word in the Fagunwa's corpus. And this is putting Yoruba language into a tool that was not even optimized or included by the developers that this is meant for Yoruba. But knowing that computers would try to read them as words. And one interesting thing is after doing that, you know, some of the words that came out, I noticed that they are not even the real words within the text from Yoruba language. So what I did was to silence them, you know, to look for the most frequent words and to be able to see deeper discourses in the text. And I generated this most frequent word, ti, ni, and all this thing. After generating this, the intention is to use this most frequent word to translate them into English and to turn them to stop words, which I can use to explore the corpus of Amos Tutuola in order to see the similarities. Now, one thing about these stop words is that they are not just words alone from the language which they emerge from. So if you look at the T, for instance, it's an adjective. It can be used at several points as who, which, whom as relative pronoun. It's an adjective which is yet. It's a preposition which is to of belonging. Need to is like that. And sometimes some of the Yoruba words are not really like English words. Sometimes they're even pointers and they have multiple meanings, and the context cannot just be clarified easily as English language will be clarified in any of the existing tools. And then you see, for instance, if you see the un is a sign of the present participle. Mo un lo. So un there is not just an independent word on its own, but you know, when Voyant or Python we do word tokenization, splitting into words, it might identify them as one or on its own, and that's where, for instance, identifying it as its own is what makes some of them to actually come up, which after being silenced, I generated them as in their English format. And getting the English translation, now what I have is this corpus after silencing those those kind of words that are coming up, in order to see the conceptual word and categories built into the text. I'll go back to this. And as I explained, that it is not difficult even for NLP to do the word tokenization. So it's able to get ni, atari, and all this. But when it comes to sentence tokenization, it might not, and even the usage. Now, I'm not actually referring to the limitations of the tools, because I still want to use them anyway in a way to get my result or to get the desired result. So a shift to Amos Tutuola's corpus. Amos Tutuola's corpus, written in English language, can easily fit into Voyant, can easily fit into NLP, and it did the sentence tokenization easily, unlike a Yoruba word, or the one that was written Yoruba, it couldn't do the sentence tokenization. But engaging with Amos Tutuola's corpus, it's engaging with it as if it's Yoruba, but because it was written by a Yoruba person in English. And my own assumption is that there are categories, concept, and that even in his mind, it's not writing in the English style. His mind is still like moving from the Yoruba word and categories to English. So the stopwords we generated from a sample corpus of Yoruba writer who wrote his own in Yoruba, generated their translation, the translations of those most frequent word, gave this, those words that were used as stopwords to generate what we have. And then, you know, you can see 20 stopwords are presented as this because they are represented when they were broken down from the context of usage. And then when it was used to silence the corpus of Amos Tutuola's novel, we see the similarities that comes out. So eniyan, you know, when we talk about our people, it's also people in the other side. Ọkùnrin, which we talk about man, it's also frequent there. What do we call it? Ọmọ, child, is also frequent there. And so you see certain kind of similarities. And this takes me back to the root of the research, which is how do we account for similarities in Amos Tutuola's and Fagunwa's text? One wrote in indigenous language, another wrote after, and analyzing those corpus has actually shown that it's like, even if we combine as many as possible of their novels, they're still going to have these striking similarities in major concepts, categories, and ontological outlook that engage in their work. Now, to establish this further, looking at all this ontology, like people saying, relationships that were also men, emphasis on men, could this be a pattern, an unconscious pattern in African novelists and literary writers? And the origin of the pattern may not be that one copy the other, but in trying to even represent African reality in other people's language, in European and other colonial languages, did we end up still saying the same thing and viewing the same category? This act made me to actually go to the other corpus, other novels by other African writers. This time around, not writers who are even from the same linguistic background, as Faguwa and Amos Tutuola are Yoruba. So this time around, let's look at Chinua Achebe, and generating a corpus from few of his novels, which are listed here: Arrow of God, a man and the people, La and Girls at War. So that, and then I generated I silenced it with the same stop words generated from the indigenous corpus, and then it's given saying again, man again, people. The same goes for Ngige Watiogo. The same goes for Ben Okri. Corpus generated, and these are not. So this makes me to come to some kind of conclusion that the similarities in styles and content could be accounted for on a possible unconscious cognitive inference of writers' indigenous or native languages in the literary process. And the tools has actually made us to explore that unconscious process coming up. And this unconscious process could even go within linguistic framework, but the word view, how the word is being seen and the realities before them. English writers whose work were written in English language are unconsciously affected by the indigenous or linguistic cognitive state, such that a proper computational analysis of their text can only achieve meaningful results in the light of forms and patterns embedded in a literary heritage. Computational analysis and extraction of styles and themes and background of numerous African literature in English and other European language can be enhanced only when we extract these models and we use it to engage with them in arriving at some of all these models and patterns that are embedded in ontology and linguistic framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Because Augustine is the co-host and the presenter, I will lead the discussion now so that he can answer the questions. And I think it would be nice if we could ask him some questions or remarks related to his presentation. We are still waiting for someone from the second group of presenters. Okay. Let me also switch on the camera, because those who speak should be seen. Are there any questions related to Augustine's presentation? Maybe I can start. I have two questions because you focused on Yoruba and you said tokenization. How difficult is tokenization in Yoruba? Because it depends, of course, on the language typology, and you seem to find it very easy.
The tokenization in Yoruba, as you can see from the screenshot that I did from that, you can see that when I put Igbo Olodumare and the second novel Elegbeje of Faguwa, it's able to identify them as separate words to do word tokenization. So you can see Mo, Ede, Yoruba, A, Yi, Kun, Fun, O. So it's able to pick that. And I think that's based on the fact that French and some other languages that have to do with tonal marks are already also registered in the corpus. So you can see D, me, and that really helps Voyant and to do the same thing, because they're also built on LLP. But when it comes to sentence tokenization, that was chaos that I have, because to get a sentence, it's a little bit, it can be very difficult to know which one is now a sentence for this. If for instance now we use one of the example of some of the most frequent words, and then we said fun can be for on behalf of somebody, you know,
Yeah.
you know, to strew, to scatter, to squeeze out, to press out, to give, to blow. And then it can also depend on the various ways in which it's being used. And then you can know that some of these Yoruba words also have toner, and it can be the same word but different meaning. It can be the same appearance, and I think that what NLP does is representation, and it looks at the thing and translates and takes it as a category, and so some of the toner things that are in Yoruba that are not like in Yoruba, we have, you can make, you know, you can put tone mark up, you can also put down. That does not exist in other European languages. So it couldn't undo some of those words, you know, the words that we have up and down.
Yeah.
Because that's unique to Yoruba language.
Of course. Yeah. Well argued. Are there any other questions? Then let me add my second question, and that is, of course, you only chose so far, you know, 2 of the novels, and you also chose specific specific other writers. And of course, were the books you've chosen so far enough for a detailed analysis, or are you aiming at expanding the number of books or number of writers? For instance, of course, everyone noticed that you've left out Wole Soyinka, which I would have taken as a first comparative choice, but you have not yet.
Yes, the research has limitation. There is no real ethics policy on ground for digitizing people's corpus,
Yeah,
and turning it, except duration number of years. And so one of the things is I've tried to write to Soyinka, because he's still alive, to take permission. I have a digital copy of his corpus, but I can't bring it forward to avoid legal case. So to take permission from him, and I hope he replies, because that's where one of the things is Fagunwa's book was translated by Soyinka and Igbo Olodumare, you know, and the forest of thousand demons, and he explained some of these nuances engage in it, that he has to even develop Irumole. You can't call it a demon, because Irumole are entities that does not even exist in the Western anthology. So he has to create words for it. I would love to engage further in his corpus when I get the permission.
yeah, of course. I mean, you may also rather need the permission of the publisher, but of course, yeah, that is a major restriction in such research. But the principle you've started is very interesting, of course. Are there any other comments or questions?
I'll ask a question or a comment. So I just wanted to say thank you, Augustine. I really enjoyed your presentation. And I think it highlights, I think, a few challenges. One is like the way that the gaps in NLP for working with Yoruba and languages, like you said, you know, you talked about how Yoruba has a different intonation that isn't really captured with the written form. Right? So how do we, I don't know if you have suggestions for how do we improve the NLP so that it can actually, you know, more accurately work with languages that have, you know, that have intonation, or even, you know, oral languages that might not have a written form at all, let's say. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I think what I don't know whether I'm right, but when I thought about that, you know, I was looking at solutions for that, and the first thing that came to my mind is, can I train models, at least a sample model that can generate that? And the first tool I encountered to use in training such model was Docano, because Docano has not reached that final stage. it's meant for annotation. It's meant for, but it's like when you put all the novels there, they have programmed it in such a way it can identify persons, places, categories, things, and other things. It can easily do that for English language, but they train that. So they still enjoin people to train that, but they allow the code to be available in the GitHub, which I try to make on my server and get some other colleagues in such a way that we begin to train the models to understand that like calabash, like certain concepts and realities that only an African person can picture that. If somebody else picture it, the person will picture something close to it, but that's not the exact thing. So when they talk about people, our people, you know, somebody will think our people is just ordinary our people, but it goes beyond. And like saying or said, which is one of the most frequent, it's not just ordinary someone is talking, and it shows there's something emphasis there. And those are some of the things we are trying to do. It will be easier when, for instance, there are more trained models and platform, and then NLP2 will get that. But we still need serious developers to take a look into that. It's problematic, as you have observed to Isabel.
Thanks.
And what about a semantic network? I mean, is there anything like that you could use in Yoruba? You know, like an English thesaurus is a word net is a network based on semantics. Is there anything like that in Yoruba, or could you do something like that in Yoruba relatively easily?
Yes, I try to look like what we can say, because the library in Python allows certain kind of semantic analysis. But I try to do that, but it's like asking a blind man to bring something out of a room. It can't actually say this is a noun, this is a verb. It was not really trained for that. So that has to be manually done. And to do it manually, I must admit that I used the dictionary myself, because this language, let's say Yoruba language, I can't speak for other languages, because that's my first language. Yoruba language itself, even for native speaker, has dynamics that you have to consult the Yoruba linguist for some clarification on some things. And when part of the thing I try to do is, what are the current research by technologies like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram in trying to do that? So I found out on most of the Yoruba Facebook accounts where people are typing and writing in Yoruba, the Facebook has generated certain algorithm to help in translation, but it turns most of the things upside down. It doesn't. So and then when I use Google Yoruba to English translator, it has a fixed word for. So it's like they take a particular novel or a particular work that is translated word to word translation, and word to word translation in which a word can mean one simple thing and can be used within various contexts. It's not the same for the Yoruba. So it's like the technology meant for other languages, like as Professor Tunde Adegbola will say, who is a language technologist, during an interview with him. He said that the NLP is like a toddler, the capability of machine learning, because the language it has incorporated few languages, and its intelligence is so little. So it's not as bright as it's assumed. So it can really work with English, work with some, but it still needs to be trained on various possibilities in which certain words are not even independent on their own. They are like following more words. They are presenting unlo. You know, unlo does not mean anything without the law. Umbo, mumbo, or me in English, which can means me, but is a kind of condensed form of a me. So you can say first person noun, first person pronoun, first person, third person, all those ones, it has its own, And that's where the dynamics of that kind of intelligence to train something, it's to train a machine in a very new way that it does not really know, and the smartness that it does not have. And that is also on a global impact. Why this is necessary for global community to show interest is that it shows the limitation and the lack of intelligence in what we currently use as machine learning framework. That's the NLP itself.
Yes, of course, but I mean, you're getting very general. It is clear that you need deep learning and you need neural networks. And for instance, you can check translations between world languages, for instance, by checking DeepL. I don't know whether you've seen that. DeepL, I'll put it into the chat and then you can find it. That is the new way of translation. When you look for that, if you want a translation from German into English, you don't know any German, but the English is really good. If you want a translation from English to German, it is not perfect, but for Yoruba, it may be difficult. It is much better than Google Translate or anything like that. You need neural networks to do that, but of course that has to be done by other Yoruba scholars. Good.
Thank you.